I want to read you a poem. This will be a short poem, and we'll do this in the usual way where I read it once with a bit of my color commentary, and then I read it a second time straight. So we squeeze the juice out of it, so we kind of know what's going on, and then we read it once through, just so you can experience the poem itself as its own thing. Okay. And this is a poem by Robert Bly, one of the great American poets, probably, arguably the best living American poet now. He's in his 90s. And Robert Bly was a close friend. He would perhaps call himself a protege or mentee of William Stafford, the poet we read 2 sessions ago in the first session, the poet who talked about the golden thread and the line of elephants and all that. Okay. And as you'll remember, Bill Stafford had this habit of writing morning poems where he wouldn't get out of bed in the morning until he had written a poem. And Robert Bly, being his friend and someone who was very influenced by him. By the way, quick side note on Robert Bly: those of you who have asked me about like initiation, and in particular male initiation, Robert Bly was also the leader of like the sort of this men's movement in America in the 90s, and he wrote this book called Iron John, where he reads the Grimm brothers' fairy tale Iron John mythopoetically as a dream, as I can do in a future session if you want, and takes wisdom out of that sacred sort of guidance space of that fairy tale dream and applies it specifically to the task of male initiation and just like the crisis of men, in the West and in particular in America, in our age. But his main thing was he's an American poet. And so what Robert Bly did was, inspired by Bill Stafford, I think there was a summer, like 3 or 4 month period, where he did morning poems too, where he like was in his cabin in, I think, Montana, and he would not get out of bed in the morning until he had written a poem. And I think a collection of those poems ended up in this volume called Morning Poems by Robert Bly. So with that, so he was inspired by Bill Stafford. And the poem from Morning Poems I want to read you is a poem entitled What Bill Stafford Was Like. Okay, so sacred space, nested in sacred space, nested in sacred space, through the power of poetry. And he wrote this, of course, this was after Bill had died. I think he died in 92. And this came out in 97. What Bill Stafford was like. With small steps, he climbed very high mountains and offered distinctions to persuasive storms, delicacies at the edge of something larger, a comfort in walking on ground close to water. In dreams, when you see the symbol of water, it's typically a symbol of insight, a symbol of the deeper, submerged, not unexplored, but deeper parts of you, from which these insights and powerful beings come out. Whales breach and there are sharks in the water, it's dark in the water. And in a dream, you're often afraid to go into the water because you're afraid of the insight that the side of you is bringing you. And so it's just a beautiful line that he, offered distinctions to persuasive storms, delicacies at the edge of something larger, this ocean within us, a comfort in walking on ground close to water, where you don't fear the crocodiles are going to come up and grab you. They're a part of you, and you welcome them in for, a cup of tea. Something large, but it wasn't an animal snorting in a cave, right? This sort of character we're often scared of in our dreams. But more like the rustling of 1,000 small winged birds, all together, comfortable in a field, feeding. One felt at home nearby. And so, and I know his relationship with Bill Stafford from other sources. It was just this feeling that Bill was able to bring you close to the edge of big, possibly typically scary um, insights and parts of your own inner self through his poetry, through the golden thread image, right? And offer a distinction to that persuasive storm to help you unpack it, to help you understand it, so that you would be comfortable being close to that water of your own insight. So that you didn't feel like you were going close to this animal snorting in a cave that's going to come out and rip your head off, but more like the rustling of 1,000 small winged birds, all together, comfortable in a field, feeding, taking nourishment, spiritual nourishment, emotional nourishment. One felt at home nearby. There are many possible ways to see the world, to whom we should be fair. When someone spoke, his face thought, and his eyebrow said it. The words weren't always comforting. Calculated to nudge us along to that place, just over there, where we would be safe for the night. That's it. So that poem gives me the feeling of being in sacred space with you, but also, knowing that Robert Bly wrote this poem, in bed first thing as he got up in the morning, as a tribute, as an homage to Bill Stafford, because that's the way Bill did it. And then to write a poem about Bill, right, about how he basically created sacred space for people, and was able to sort of guide them to a place that was close to the water so you could take that nourishment, but not feel afraid. And it was just so beautiful. And I wanted to share that with you. So I'll read this poem again, and then we'll close the session. What Bill Stafford was like. With small steps, he climbed very high mountains and offered distinctions to persuasive storms, delicacies at the edge of something larger, a comfort in walking on ground close to water. Something large, but it wasn't an animal snorting in a cave, more like the rustling of 1,000 small winged birds, all together, comfortable in a field, feeding. One felt at home nearby. There are many possible ways to see the world, to whom we should be fair. When someone spoke, his face thought, and his eyebrow said it. The words weren't always comforting, but calculated to nudge us along to that place, just over there, where we would be safe for the night.